And right now, we're in the middle of a night of uproar and anger in the House of Commons over how the Speaker's interpreted Parliament's rules. It looks like the decision has spared Labour from the spectacle of a damaging internal rebellion on Gaza, but it has sparked an extraordinary row, fury from both the government, who are boycotting tonight's votes, and the SNP, who've walked out of the chamber. So tonight we have farce and we have fury on the floor of the House of Commons. Now, it's understood that Sir Lindsay Hoyle made the decision to allow an amendment from Labour to be voted on because he was worried about the safety of MPs and he wanted the widest possible debate. But tonight, that decision has allowed an MP to table a motion to topple the Speaker from his role. You join us in the middle of a night of chaos and fury on an issue of huge international significance and sensitivity. We'll be bringing you full analysis and live reaction across the board. I should say that MPs are currently voting now on whether or not to sit in private. So we could be moments away from the feed that you're watching right now of the House of Commons being cut and for us to not know what is going on while those votes are happening. Absolutely extraordinary. And we're going to be focusing on the row that has broken out in the House of Commons this evening. Now, of course, it's worth saying what happens in Westminster in many ways is pretty meaningless in comparison to the devastation and the loss of life in Gaza. And however MPs vote or don't vote, it's not going to suddenly spark a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. So what on earth is going on? Why is there pandemonium in Parliament? Why are MPs walking out? Why is the Speaker's authority under attack? If you ever needed proof of how the war in the Middle East is ripping our own politics apart, well, this is it. We can bring in now our political editor, Beth Rigby. Beth, what is happening?
Well, Sophie, it is absolute, as you said, chaos in there at the moment. MPs, let's go back to the chamber.
Sorry, Beth, we're going to go to the chamber.
The ayes to the right, 20. The noes to the left, 212. So the noes have it, unlocked. The question is that Amendment A be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. The ayes have it. The question is the motion as amended. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
I wish to respond to the point of order raised by the leader. I wish to respond to the point raised by the Leader of the House. Today's debate was exceptional in its intensity with which all parties wish to secure a vote on their own propositions. It took the decisions which were intended to allow the House the widest range of propositions, widest range of propositions on which to express a view. I wanted to do the best, and it was my wish. It was my wish to do the best by every member of this House. Yes. I take very seriously. No. The danger is that that's why I wanted everybody to be able to express, because I am very, very concerned about the security of all members. Let me just take this through. I was very concerned, I am still concerned, and that's why the meetings I've had today is about the security of members, their families, and the people that are involved. And I've got to say, I regret how it's ended up. It was not my intention. I wanted all to ensure they could express their views and all sides of the House could vote. as it was. In particular, the SNP were ultimately unable to vote on their proposition. I am, and I regret, with my sadness, that it's ended up on like that, in this position. That was never my intention for it to end up like this. I was absolutely convinced that the decision was done with the right intentions. I recognise the strength of feeling of members on this issue. Clear today has not shown the House at its best. I will reflect on my part in that of the course I recommit myself to ensuring that all members of this House are treated fairly. I do not want it to have ended like this. I want to say to the House, I will meet with all the key players of each party. I think it is right that I meet with each one, and that. Can I just put that correct? I've never met with Sue Gray today. I didn't bump into her today. I'm offended by that comment. I think you'd like to withdraw it. Yeah, because that is the danger that we've ended up with this House in speculation of not what is fact and not factual. I am honest to this House. I am true to this House. I believe in all members of this House. And I have tried to do what I thought was the right thing for all sides of this House. It is regrettable, and I apologise for a decision that didn't end up in the place that I wished for. So I would say no. I say no. I will meet with all the. Just be quiet, please. I will meet with the leaders and with the chief whips, and let us have a discussion on what is the best way forward to try and ensure that, and I say again, I thought I was doing the right thing and the best thing, and I regret it, and I apologise for how it's ended up. I do take responsibility for my actions, and that's why I want to meet, with the key players who have been involved. Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for coming to the House, for saying that you will reflect on what has happened today, for offering your apologies and to meet with members of this House. You're our Speaker, and we wish you to defend the rights of all members of this House. And I thank you for recommitting yourself to those responsibilities today and for coming to the floor of the House.
Just to respond to that is why I tried to do that in the first place. It ended up in the wrong place. And I do say I apologise to all, and in particular to the SNP. And I say it's not where I wanted, it is where I am. I will now leave it at that for the moment, but I do want to meet as soon as possible. Point of order, Steve.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Can I firstly begin by echoing your sentiments in relation to the debate that was had in this chamber in relation to the most important of matters with regards to the safety of civilians in Gaza and indeed those in Israel. There has been a difference of view in the House today, but I think that difference of view has been expressed in a way which we can all agree has been in a positive fashion, in the best fitting way of any democracy, any functioning democracy. Mr. Speaker, whilst I acknowledge your apology, the reality is that you were warned by the clerks of the House that your decision could lead to the SNP not having a vote on our very own Opposition Day. As a result, we have seen the SNP Opposition Day turn into a Labour Party Opposition Day. I'm afraid that that is treating myself and my colleagues in the Scottish National Party with complete and utter contempt. And I will take significant convincing that your position is not now intolerable.
To respond to that, and quite rightly, I understand the feeling. As I said, I would like to have that conversation in private. I would like to meet with you as soon as possible. I'm now going to leave it to continue. Sorry. Point of order. No, come.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I just make a point of order that actually the amendment in the name of the Leader of the Opposition was this evening passed unanimously, and therefore, yes, it was, and therefore.
Order. I don't think now is the time, and what I want to do, I want to move on and I want to meet with the important players. I'm now going to hand over to the Deputy, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Deputy Speaker.
I will take one more point of order and then I really think we need to move on. Kit Malthouse.
I'm grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker. There are 2 points on which I seek your clarification from what Mr. Speaker has just said. The first is that he implied that the proceedings of this House were manipulated with regard to outside intimidation. That regard was given to things that were said outside on social media that were then reacted to within the House. And I think that's quite an important Rubicon that's been crossed, and something that may have been crossed without the consent of members. I would like to know where the processes of this House are likely to go, given the outside influences that may be brought to bear. And I'd be grateful for some clarification on that. The second issue is that I'm afraid, and as you know, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have the greatest respect for you, but bluntly, you seem to have rammed through 2 divisions that were quite important to quite a lot of members, in which no individual vote will have been recorded. And a number of us had thought quite carefully about how we were going to vote in those divisions. And we were essentially, forgive me, taken by surprise by those 2 divisions being rammed through. So I wondered if it would be possible to either void them or run them again.
I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for his point of order. The fact is, I put the question. Nobody called against it. Point of order, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was quite clear from the level of noise when the question was put that the view of the Deputy Speaker was being challenged. I think it is absolutely extraordinary that that noise level was deemed to be I. It is inconceivable that anybody hearing it would have thought it was I. And it is quite clear from all our standing orders, all our traditions, that when the Speaker or Deputy's decision is challenged, it should go to a division.
Well, I'm extremely sorry. I took on the voices. I was quite clear where we were, and the whole thing would have been considerably clearer if the government had not withdrawn at that position. Point of order.
Must consider how this looks to people outside. Completely in order, it looks like chicanery. But I rise to ask a question on behalf of the small parties. What precedent has been set today in the way this opposition day has been handled? And how can we ever have faith in the future that our voices and our votes will actually be heard? Or will it be always the 2 big parties here?
Well, I think the Honourable Lady has heard what Mr. Speaker said, that he does intend to talk with people. I also understand that the excuse me, I'm answering this of order. The Honourable Gentleman must resume his seat. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. I also know that the chair of the Procedure Committee is going to be looking at some of the issues that have been raised as well, at the request of the Speaker. And I think, point of order,
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wonder if I can get your guidance on how I can make my views more known to my constituents. I was one of the first members of Parliament. I was one of the first members of Parliament to call for the release of hostages combined with a permanent ceasefire. I lost my government job as a result of it. I was also because people misrepresented my position, someone suggested on social media that they should show my wife a real man. Someone also suggested that they would attack me and my family. Already today, Labour councillors in my patch are tweeting that I have not supported a ceasefire. I wanted to vote with the Scottish National Party motion on a ceasefire. Can you advise how I can make my constituents clear of my views if I'm not able to vote on it?
Well, this is an utterly extraordinary night that is happening in the House of Commons. First, we had a visibly shaken Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle apologising to the House of Parliament, saying that he takes responsibility. He regrets that things have ended up in the position they had because of his decision to change the usual procedure in Parliament to allow the Labour amendment to be debated. He says he's going to meet with all of the key players from every party. That's not enough, though, for the SNP. We saw Stephen Flynn, the Westminster leader of the SNP, accuse the Speaker of treating the SNP with contempt and saying that he would take some convincing to see that the Speaker's position was not irretrievable, intolerable anymore. Absolutely extraordinary scenes. And then, of course, we saw the deep unhappiness from members of the Conservative Party, including Kit Malthouse, including Jacob Rees-Mogg, that the two votes were effectively waved through without a division, the Labour amendment and the SNP motion. Absolutely extraordinary scenes of the House of Commons. Pandemonium, passions running very high, and I have to say, difficult not to see this as a pretty undignified response to a very, very serious situation in Gaza. Well, let's bring in our political editor, Beth Rigby, shall we? Beth, I can't remember seeing anything like this.
I've never seen anything like this before, and I can't remember in my lifetime, and I'm getting on a bit, this vote to sit in private. Had it passed, the Commons feed would have been blacked out. It didn't, but the Speaker came back. He apologised. He said it didn't go how he intended it to. He explained his motives, which was he wanted different amendments in order to try not to stoke more antipathy towards MPs, but the SNP absolutely fuming. It was their opposition day, and instead a Labour amendment has been passed through the Commons. Stephen Flynn, the SNP Westminster leader, is here. Stephen, can you just explain what's just gone on? Have you seen anything like this before?
I'm at a bit of a loss, if I'm honest with you, Beth. And I want to start by apologising to people at home, because what we were here to do today was to vote on an SNP motion calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. There's 30,000 people lost their lives, 70,000 people who, of course, are injured, and 1.4 million people waiting to be attacked by the Israeli Defence Force. Today was meant to be about them. But Westminster does this, doesn't it? It turns it into a matter all about Westminster. And what a circus this is, because thanks to the actions of the Speaker of the House of Commons, the SNP has been stitched up to the point that the Labour Party were the only game in town today. Now, there's going to be some serious recriminations for this, I would imagine. I've said to the Speaker himself that he is going to have to convince me that his position is no longer intolerable. Today was about something much bigger than Westminster, and yet here we are debating Westminster's nonsense.
How much do you think the Speaker is going to have to resign over this?
I think that'll be for others to posit a view at the moment. I'm going to go and speak with Mr. Speaker. I'm going to allow him the opportunity to explain to me why he decided to put the Labour Party's interests before the Scottish National Party's interests. He is supposed to be impartial. That has not happened.
Do you think
today.
He was leaned on by Labour?
Everyone knows that Keir Starmer was in to speak with the Speaker before his decision today. I think Keir Starmer should be standing here right now and explaining himself why he believed that he couldn't back an SNP motion calling for an immediate ceasefire, which condemned Israel for its collective punishment of the Palestinian people. And as a result, the Speaker himself has found himself in an intolerable position where MPs, quite frankly, were at a complete loss as to what was going on.
It seems to me that you think he's going to have to go. I heard what you said.
Yeah, and I'm going to give the Speaker the benefit of the doubt in the first instance to be able to explain to me why this has happened. Because as I said, this was about something so much bigger than this place. This was about people's lives in Gaza. Now, we have an agreed motion tonight that the Labour Party have put forward, which calls for an immediate ceasefire. I'm delighted that we were in the position where the Labour Party were talking about an immediate ceasefire. We managed to put a backbone into the Labour Party, who have prevaricated on this issue for months. But we should also have had a vote on the SNP motion, which highlighted the collective punishment of the Palestinian people.
Do you think the Speaker acknowledged in there that he got this wrong? It felt like he regretted what had happened for sure.
I mean, he was very clear in his apology, but I want to hear much more about how this decision was arrived at, who was involved. I want to know why Keir Starmer was given an audience with the Speaker. I didn't have an audience with the Speaker today. This was supposed to be the SNP's opposition.
You think the Speaker's partisan?
I want to know why Keir Starmer felt it necessary to try and influence the Speaker of the House of Commons to ensure that the SNP motion today on a ceasefire in Gaza, which called out the collective punishment of the Israeli state upon the Palestinian people, wasn't heard.
Do you have, because some people say you were playing politics today, that Labour had shifted position to a humanitarian immediate ceasefire, that some of the language in your amendment with Keir Starmer looking at potentially becoming Prime Minister, they felt they could not support that language if later in the year he has to go negotiate with Israel. What do you say to people that say you're playing politics because you are trying to go back to voters in Scotland and say Labour voted against our ceasefire amendment so that you can create an election dividing line? You're playing politics.
I don't need to tell the public anything. All I need to do is show them what's happened in the House of Commons over the last few hours. The fact that there has been a Labour stitch-up at the very highest level, which has prevented the SNP from exercising our view that the Palestinian people have been the victims of collective punishment from the Israeli state. And it is up to the public to determine who's been playing games. But if they watch the footage of what's happening in there, I reckon they'll come to a pretty clear conclusion.
But this is semantics. You all broadly agree on the same thing, and you're all playing politics with something that's a really serious policy issue.
This is why I'm so frustrated, because this is a much bigger issue than the Westminster circus, but it's been turned into a circus by the Speaker and by Keir Starmer. It is a nonsense.
Will the Speaker remain in post?
That's for others to determine.
What about your view?
But I've yet to be convinced that he deserves to be in that post.
Stephen Flynn, thank you
so much
for talking to us. Well, there you have it. Stephen Flynn claiming that Westminster was playing politics, claiming that Keir Starmer has bent the ear of the Speaker, saying it was a stitch-up, and yet to be convinced that Lindsay Hoyle should remain in post. An opposition day debate turned into a real crisis for Sir Lindsay Hoyle, and also for the public, perhaps wondering what on earth all the politicians are fighting over when they agree the broad principles of a ceasefire, or at least a humanitarian pause.
Beth, thank you. Great to get your analysis, as always. Well, extraordinary scenes there in Parliament. And this is the scenes just outside. You can see there the protests, people waving the Palestinian flag. And I think really perhaps drawing the contrast between the scenes of high drama within the Commons, some would say politics been played, and of course a very serious situation that is happening in Gaza with the loss of life and the devastation in that region. Well, let's bring in Sam Coates, our Deputy Political Editor, and John Craig, our Chief Political Correspondent. Absolutely extraordinary scenes in the House of Commons. I mean, there is so much to unpick here. Firstly, we have Stephen Flynn coming, I guess, within a whisker of calling for the Speaker to go, Sam.
Politics looks broken tonight. You can't have looked at the last 70 minutes of total chaos and getting messages from people inside the voting lobbies, getting messages from MPs trying to work out what to do, I think they felt rudderless. I think they felt confused. I think they felt worried. I think that the spectacle of Britain's most senior politicians try to debate and vote on what's going on in the Middle East has, really put the Commons chamber to shame tonight. There are some very real consequences from what's just happened. Right now, the Speaker is fighting for his political life. It is not clear to me that Lindsay Hoyle survives this. It is not clear to me that Lindsay Hoyle thinks that Lindsay Hoyle can survive this. I don't know what you thought, Sophie. I thought that the Speaker of the House of Commons looked close to tears as he begged his fellow MPs to back him in the chair. He did not say he would continue. He said he would meet and consider his position further. It appears he has lost the confidence of the third biggest party in politics. It looks from the Leader of the House as if he may well have lost the confidence of the governing party. In those circumstances, you do not continue. Lindsay Hoyle has probably 24 hours to meet with the representatives of the major parties to remain in the Speaker's chair, or he is out, because he cannot continue in that way. Because at stake is the ability of all the different parties to have their voice in the Commons, and they think that was not upheld today, and they think that that is a big and possibly terminal problem for Lindsay Hoyle.
It's extraordinary how this has happened so quickly, and I agree with you. He looked close to tears. He looked like a broken man as he apologised and effectively asked for the forgiveness of members of Parliament. He said that he did it to try and allow the widest range of propositions, to allow MPs to express their view on a very, very difficult issue. But the irony is that you had MPs at the end of that debate very, very angry, visibly angry, because they couldn't express their position, because the SNP and the Labour motion and amendment went through without a division.
I thought it was odd that he was not in the chamber when Penny Mordaunt made her point of order. And, in fact, I texted him.
Did you get a reply?
I didn't get a reply.
No, that doesn't surprise me, to be honest.
He was clearly drafting that statement. I mean, we know why he was like... I was in the gallery for Prime Minister's questions, and it was Eleanor Lang in the chair for the questions, I think science questions, just before. He didn't turn up till a few minutes before midday. Now, we now know, of course, that he was locked in talks with Sir Alan Campbell, the Labour chief whip, and we're told Sir Keir Starmer as well. And according to Tories, Labour threatened to withdraw support from Sir Lindsay unless he chose their amendment. That's denied by Labour. And then, of course, we've seen Rosie Winston in the chair a lot. And the Speaker, I mean, I agree with you. He looked shattered, didn't he, just now? And he finally... I noticed him, actually, we just spotted him just by the Speaker's chair, just at the end of all that.
I just thought... I have to say, John, the spectacle of the Speaker of the House of Commons getting his deputy to take all the flak for minute after minute after minute was unedifying.
And it wasn't the senior deputy speaker, Dame Eleanor Lang. I don't think we've not seen her in the chamber today, and I can't remember if we have. But I was going to say, actually, if you asked me what I think about the way the day's unfolded, I was going to say the SNP has been stitched up by Labour, but then Stephen Flynn said it for us. I mean, the end result, of course, is that Labour's position has gone through on the nod. And we heard, I think it was Kit Malthouse talk about how Rosie Winston rammed it through. Now, the MPs raising the points of order were the ones who voted. There was a handful of Conservatives who wanted to vote for an immediate ceasefire, the SNP position. Kit Malthouse made a speech in which he didn't quite say he was going to be a rebel, but he suggested he was. Paul Bristow, we heard there, say he was going to be. We know that during the debate, another Conservative MP, Mark Logan, said he was going to vote against. So, frustration all round. Now, as for what happens to... I agree with Sam about how Sir Lindsay Hoyle is fighting to survive, but I've been over in the Commons today. A senior minister said to me, the government's not going to move against Lindsay Hoyle. They're clearly going to get their backbenchers to do their dirty work for them, I think. Because we all remember, I remember anyway, 2015, a botched attempt to get rid of John Bercow. It was the period when William Hague was Leader of the House of Commons and Michael Gove was Chief Whip. Okay. And I looked up the vote. It failed by 228 votes to 202. And the Haig and Gove are humiliated, and there's a big smirk on Burko's face, I remember it.
Well, we'll have to see what happens with the current Speaker of the House of Commons. This is not what we thought we were going to be discussing tonight, the survival of the Speaker. Thank you both very much indeed. We'll have much more from Sam and John throughout the programme, but I do want to go to Central Lobby now, and we can speak to the former Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, who is there. John, what on earth has happened in Parliament today?
That's exactly as you've been describing. It's absolute chaos, isn't it? I don't think it's done anyone any good, to be frank. We came here today thinking that we would have a serious debate about what's happening in Gaza. We thought we'd all have the opportunity to vote in the different forms. I was going to vote for any motion that called for an immediate ceasefire. I was going to vote for the SNP motion, and then if the Labour amendment came forward, I'd vote for that because it called for an immediate ceasefire. But what's happened now is it's just degenerated into, I think, damage to everyone, including Parliament itself. I think the rumours around Labour threatening the Speaker, if they're any way accurate, it's really damaged the Labour Party. In terms of the Speaker, I think his confidence in the Speaker has been significantly undermined, and I speak as a friend of Lindsay Hoyle. I think it has been undermined, and I think the games that the Conservative Party were playing as well by not participating in a vote, they're the government. So I think everyone comes out of this really badly damaged.
You say the confidence in the Speaker has been undermined. Do you think it's been fatally undermined? Do you think he'll be able to continue in his job?
Can't tell at this stage. All I know that there's a depth of anger here that I've not seen for quite a while, and it would take an awful lot of reassurance to people to re-establish the status of the Speaker in this way. And as I say, I'm a friend of Lindsay's. I just wish he hadn't made this decision. And sometimes you just have to abide by the rules. It's almost like the way players surround the referee on a football pitch, trying to influence the referee. That should never have happened if it took place. The Speaker should have been allowed to do his job, and he should have stood firm on that, on the basis of the procedures that we've adopted over centuries.
You talked there about rumours that the Labour Party threatened the Speaker, tried to influence the Speaker. Now, they've denied that. They say that is categorically not true. Do you believe them?
I don't know anymore. I just don't know. After today, I just can't tell what's happened. And to find the fact that the Speaker has taken the decision that he did, contrary to our standing orders, to be frank, I just wonder what did influence him. And maybe everyone should come clean about what meetings did take place, who was present, and maybe publish some record of those meetings as well. Because what we do know is that the clerks of the House have put a letter in the House of Commons library saying what their advice was, and their advice was clearly that this was contrary to standing orders.
So you're saying effectively that Keir Starmer needs to go on the record and say exactly what was discussed in those meetings with the Speaker. That's what you're saying?
I think both the Speaker, Keir Starmer, all those participating in these discussions need to come absolutely clear, because somehow we've got to restore confidence in this place. This is the mother of parliaments. You know, when people get elected here to represent their constituents, they think they're coming to a parliament that's respected across the globe. Behaviour like this undermines the confidence in that parliament, amongst our own constituents and actually also across the world.
As MPs were voting, not voting, walking out, apologising, making accusations in Parliament, outside Parliament, people were protesting about the situation in Gaza. How do you think this looks to the public?
Dreadful, absolutely dreadful. What's happening in Gaza, we've got children being killed, we've got people starving at the moment, and all we wanted today is express a view about the need for a ceasefire. And then we descend into this chaos of, it's just appalling, to be honest. I'm ashamed of the place at the moment. I'm ashamed of what happened today. And we need to rectify it soon if we're going to restore our reputation.
OK, thank you very much indeed. John McDonnell there speaking to us from Central Lobby, angry, calling for Keir Starmer, calling for the Speaker to publish a record of exactly what happened in any conversations there, and saying that confidence in the Speaker has been undermined. He's not sure whether it's been undermined to the extent that he can no longer continue in his position. Well, let's bring John and Sam back in at this point, shall we? Sam Coates, Deputy Political Editor. What do you make of that interview there with John McDonnell? I mean, anger.
That is a friend of Lindsay Hoyle's suggesting that there is a very real chance he's got to go. That's very serious. It's very serious. Look, I think if you were, for instance, a government Tory tactician right now, you wouldn't necessarily do a rerun of what John was talking about in 2015 and try and oust the Speaker. But that isn't how these things always work. Sometimes it's a question of emotion, feeling, judgment. And from the messages I'm getting on my phone, random Tory ministers are getting in touch to say the Speaker's just got to go. Just got to go. He cannot command the confidence of the House. And so I think this could move actually quite quickly. Think of this, Sophie. This is going to happen again, right? There are going to be more moments that the Commons chamber is going to be called upon to vote on what people think about Israel and what's going on in the Middle East and ceasefires. The scenes that we have seen today are quite possibly going to be repeated at future points. It's unedifying. It's damaging to politics. Lindsay Hoyle's only argument, really, that he has put publicly is that he was trying to give MPs an opportunity to put their points of view across for their own safety and security. Can he say tonight that MPs are safer because of the course of action that he took? Or is as a reflection of the chaos, the tumult, the uncertainty, the anger, the temperature rising inside the House of Commons chamber? It looks to me as if things are as dangerous and as toxic as they could possibly be. That argument is going to face some challenge from fellow MPs.
John,
I was talking to Tobias Elwood over in the Commons, and of course, it was last week, wasn't it, when a mob circled his house, and he was telling me how he was on his way there, and the police said, "Don't go home, don't go home." And we know that at the weekend, Tom Tugendhat and Chris Philp, two Home Office ministers, wrote to police chiefs saying, "Get tough." And then we heard just now, didn't we, from Paul Bristow about threats to his family and so on. I was very sceptical when I heard that argument. First of all, we heard it from, I think, a spokesperson for the Speaker during the day, and then he mentioned it himself, about safety being his consideration. I mean, as I say, I was sceptical about that. Just very briefly, Stephen Flynn, in his chat with Beth there, was talking about this letter. This is the letter that the Speaker made public. It's from Tom Goldsmith, who's the Clerk of the House, and he does, in fact, make that very point. The procedural impact of the decision taken today is that the first division is likely to be on the official opposition's amendment rather than on the SNP's motion. And depending on the outcome of any such division, it's possible the House will not be able to vote on the SNP motion, nor the government's alternative proposition. So the Speaker was warned. Now, normally, on an opposition day, the opposition motion is voted on first, because what's the point if there's no vote on their motion?
Yeah, as he said, Stephen Flynn said, turning an opposition day into a Labour opposition day. We'll have plenty more from both of you in a moment, but I do want to bring in Ian Duncan-Smith, the former Conservative leader, who is live in Central Lobby for us and joins us now. Ian, how are you feeling after the extraordinary events that we've just seen unfold?
Well, I'm astonished, actually, first of all, and ashamed, really. The House of Commons is meant to, at the end of debates, express its view, for or against. It's a very simple question. And normally, on opposition days, I've been here long enough to know that prior to 1997, during that Conservative Parliament, it was agreed that usually the government got to put its amendment to an opposition motion, so you, more often than not, lost the opposition motion. It just didn't get voted on. And it was agreed at the time, at the behest of Labour, I remember, who were in opposition, could we not turn this around by standing order and have the opposition motion first and then any amendments? And that was agreed. So ever since then, we have always had the main opposition motion and then whatever the government chooses to do afterwards, if they're going to amend it. And so that was the reason why I think the clerk advised the Speaker that it's not designed to have three debates, three votes on this. You know, it is an opposition motion. You either agree with it or you don't, or the government ends up amending it. That's the only way it works. So to have three caused chaos, because it meant, as the clerk in his letter was clear, that it's highly likely that the Scottish National Party's amendment would not end up being voted on. And in fact, as a result of the chaos on that, we've ended up even worse than that. Nobody knew that the Deputy Speaker was actually putting the Labour amendment to the House, because the uproar was so great and people were trying to get in to question the whole point. So it was taken after 7 o'clock and it was rushed through. So everyone's angry at the moment that they didn't even know that she was putting the vote on the Labour amendment to the vote. And it was done literally as people were talking. So that's also part of the problem. So what's going on here is what may have been a story about, and it happens all the time, you know, been around the politics long enough to know that a split story or a division story with some people not abiding by the leader or the prime minister or whatever. That's a story for tomorrow, but you know that goes away. It's something that people notice, but in the end of the day, it's not the biggest thing. Has now turned into a very major story about questions about the Speaker's position, about the possible, questions. I heard them in the House tonight. I'm not saying them, but this is what I heard. Manipulation. The Scott Nats are now expressing basically that they have no confidence in the Speaker. This has become a huge story about why Labour was so keen to have their amendment when there was a very clear set of votes between the government and the Scottish National Party. So what would have been a story has now become a major story about the mess in Parliament over this and the fact that constituents don't know what people's opinions and views are.
I want to unpick a bit of this because it feels like there are many different slants to this story. Firstly, the position of the Speaker. We've heard Stephen Flynn on this programme effectively saying that he thinks his position is intolerable. You've heard John McDonnell, who describes himself as a friend of the Speaker, saying that he also is not sure if he's going to survive this. What's your feeling? Is this survivable?
Well, I would have a very simple statement about this. I'm fond of the Speaker. I voted for him to come in. I'm not in knee-jerk position to say out, or anything like that. It's not my position, ever has been. But I do hope the front bench of the Labour Party reflect on what they've just done, because they have put intolerable pressure, I think, on the Speaker, and this is the result of it. There's a reason why the clerk said very clearly in his note there is no precedent and standing orders make it clear. The reason why he's saying that the standing orders are important, because standing orders stop Parliament descending into chaos. It's always going to be the case with passions running high and anger and all the rest of it, which happens. I'm in favour of it myself because I think it shows that we really care about these things. But the reason why you need standing orders and the way votes are taken is otherwise you get what you saw tonight when standing orders collapse. And that's why standing orders bring clarity to Parliament, and when they're dispensed with or when they don't work, this is what you get. And it's an unedifying position for our constituents to be watching this on a set of votes about what will people want. Everybody's in favour of a sustainable ceasefire. There are other parameters around that, but we never really got to express a voting view, which is what you do in Parliament. So that's where the problem arises, and the Speaker, I think, has been put under intolerable pressure by the front bench of the Labour Party.
Do you have any sympathy with the argument that, I guess, both the Labour Party and the Speaker were trying to help MPs who found themselves in very difficult positions, who may be experiencing safety threats, who may be experiencing pressure from their constituents, and the feeling that both from the Labour Party and from the Speaker, they wanted to allow MPs to express themselves in a way that they felt fit? Do you have any sympathy at all with that argument?
Well, not really, because the House of Commons is designed for you to express your opinion in favour or against a motion, or to amend that motion as it stands. And then if you're not in favour of that, you vote against that. So you make it clear what you're in favour of, what you're not in favour of already. And if you look at the motions, although there are differences in it, and the Scottish Nationalist one was in fact the most different, if you look at Labour and the Conservative motion, they were quite similar. There are nuanced differences in areas. But the Scottish National one was about a ceasefire right now, as opposed to where we say we want a ceasefire, but we want a sustainable one, which requires everybody to step away and to have immediately humanitarian aid in. So there were differences, but they would have been expressed in those two, the motion and the amendment. So the idea that somehow Parliament has never had the ability to express itself before, which is why you needed this amendment, I don't really think stands. The truth is, there was plenty of time for people to make their comments and plenty of time for them to decide where they wanted to vote. But the trouble was, it's worse than all of that, because in doing this, we haven't really had a vote. So now, all the MPs in Parliament could be accused of abstaining on a vote, which isn't what we wanted to do.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Always good to get your perspective on these things. Ian Duncan-Smith there giving his reflections on what has been an extraordinary afternoon in the House of Commons that has left the position of the Speaker in real question. Well, these are the scenes outside the Houses of Parliament tonight. You can see their protesters making their feeling very clear. A reminder that tonight was supposed to be about calls for a ceasefire and the debate around that, and where the Labour, the SNP and, of course, the government stand on the nuances around the calls for a ceasefire or humanitarian pause and when it should happen. Well, with us are the Chief Political Correspondent, John Craig, and our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. Sam, what are your reflections?
So I'm going to read you a message from a Tory minister that I've just received. Tory MPs are united in the fact that Lindsay Hoyle has compromised his integrity and the integrity of the House. His position is untenable and his days are numbered. Whether we agree with the SNP or not, they should have been allowed to vote. A bad day for Parliament and a bad day for democracy. Just at this point, you cannot say whether this minister represents the government view, whether this minister represents the majority feeling inside the Conservative Party. But if you are Lindsay Hoyle tonight, you will be hearing, you will be watching, you will know that you have lost a significant amount of support through your actions, which, for better or for worse, are being seen through the prism of partisanship. And that is a big, big problem.
Extraordinary, really. John, how do you think this looks for many viewers, you know, who will have been watching over months the devastation that we've been seeing in the Middle East, and here are MPs rowing about amendments, about parliamentary procedure? I mean, it is all pretty unedifying, isn't it?
It's unedifying, but, I mean, let's not let the SNP get away with this holier-than-thou stance, because why did they put down this motion? And, in fact, their original plan was to have 2 debates today. This one on the ceasefire in Gaza, second one, commitment to £28 billion annual funding for green energy. Both designed to embarrass the Labour Party. And, of course, because Labour and the SNP are locked in a bitter battle in Scotland and will be at the next general election. So my view is that, OK, yes, you can argue that the ceasefire proposal was sincere, but they wanted to embarrass Labour. And as Stephen Flynn admits, they have now been stitched up by Labour. Now, the other point, of course, I made earlier, actually, was earlier on today when I was over in Parliament, was the Labour Party did put down their amendment before the Tories, the government did. But having said that, of course, it is odd. Normally, as we've discussed already, and Ian and various others have said, you normally get opposition motion, government amendment. It is very odd for another opposition party to put down an amendment to another opposition party.
Really interesting to talk to you both. Well, we can go now to Central Lobby and speak to the Shadow Defence Secretary, John Healey. John, do you feel sympathy for the Speaker, or did he mess us up?
Yes, good evening. The Speaker is there to protect the rights of all MPs, and he was trying to do the right thing. He was trying to make sure the widest possible debate, because he knows that it matters in Parliament, it matters in our communities, and it matters beyond the shores of Britain. And he was therefore trying to make sure that we could vote on all the motions. And even Jacob Rees-Mogg has said he was reflecting the will of the House in doing so. And this was a chance when we could have shown the best of Parliament by coming together to demand an end to the fighting in Gaza. But instead, we've revealed the worst of Westminster with this descending into a row about procedure, with a boycott from the Conservatives, a walkout from the SNP. And frankly, this does nothing to help the Palestinians, and it does nothing to advance the cause of peace.
Well, I think everyone would agree on your final point there. The issue with the Speaker, I guess, is that some MPs now think he looks biased towards the Labour Party, that he was effectively trying to help Labour in a way that he was bending the rules and bending procedure to allow that to happen. Is it now time for Labour to come utterly clean in any conversations that you had with the Speaker today? What was said?
There was no pressure on the Speaker. He's denied that. Labour has denied that. The Deputy Speaker has denied that. He's quite right, the Speaker, by saying that the rules over votes are outdated. They're stacked in favour of the government. They need to be reviewed. And he was rightly trying to reflect the very strong. He was rightly trying to reflect the very strong. Well, he was rightly trying to reflect the very strong views in Parliament, the great interest beyond Parliament, and make sure that the motions and propositions of all three parties, Labour, Conservatives and SNP, could have a vote, and that was the right thing to try and do. It's backfired because Westminster has descended into a row-about procedure which does not reflect well on us and really lets the people down that were looking to Britain in Parliament to give some sort of lead now to achieve the immediate ceasefire, one that lasts and respected by both sides and crucially can become the first steps towards a longer-term path to a two-state solution and settlement in the Middle East and a lasting peace.
John McDonnell has said that he's worried that there was undue pressure put on the Speaker, even threats. You say there wasn't, you say that the Speaker said there wasn't. Why don't you publish a record of what was said to the Speaker today so that everyone can make up their own minds?
Look, anyone who knows Lindsay Hoyle knows that he's not a man that
well, I don't know Lindsay Hoyle. I don't know Lindsay Hoyle. Our viewers don't know Lindsay Hoyle. The one way to make clear what was and wasn't said would be to publish a record.
So the Speaker is elected by the House of Commons, by the MPs, to protect the interests of MPs and in particular to help Parliament stand up to the government. Now, this afternoon he was trying to do the right thing. He was trying to do the right thing to make sure that all points of view were properly reflected in the debate and in the votes. And instead we had MPs concentrating on the procedures of the House of Commons and the row amongst themselves instead of saying Britain has a big role to play in the future of the Middle East. We need to have the government, the British government, alongside allies now, calling for an immediate end to the fighting, for a ceasefire that lasts and a road to a long-term peace. We need the British government to be saying to Hamas, as we did this afternoon in the chamber, you've got to release the hostages, to Israel, say there can be no ground offensive against Rafah, because that will lead to a catastrophe on an even greater scale than we've seen already. That was what was at stake in the debate today, not a row about who said what to the Speaker and whether the Speaker was right to interpret the rule book of the House of Commons in the way he did, but the chance to show the leadership from this country with Parliament and all parties coming together. And we could have called for an end to the fighting now. We could have called for an end to the release of the hostages now, much more aid into Gaza now, and an immediate ceasefire that lasts. But the MPs this afternoon, we've let ourselves down and we've let the country down by descending into a row about procedure in the House of Commons chamber.
If you wanted to do those things, to call for a ceasefire, to call for the immediate end to the hostages, some would say you could have voted for the SNP amendment. Now, Stephen Flynn, the Westminster leader of the SNP, has accused the Speaker of treating the SNP with contempt. He says his position is now entirely intolerable. Do you think the SNP are playing politics here?
Well, you say we could have supported the SNP motion. It was partial, it wasn't complete, it had no vision for the future, which is why we set our own arguments and our own motion down, and that's what we were ready to back. Now, in terms of the SNP's accusations against the Speaker, that's for them and them to make the argument. The Speaker was trying to do the right thing by the House of Commons. He was trying to do the right thing for the British people so they could hear the range of debates and see their MPs voting on their behalf on the range of different propositions and plans for the future. And we didn't get the chance to do that today.
OK, John Healey, thank you very much indeed. John Healey there, the Shadow Defence Secretary. We can talk now to the former Labour MP, Dame Louise Almond. She's now Vice President of the Jewish Leadership Council. Thank you for being on the programme tonight. What do you make of these extraordinary scenes we've seen in Parliament?
Well, this was chaotic. I mean, Parliament was discussing a very serious issue. Attempts were made for everybody to have the say, for a wide variety of views to be put. It's ended up in chaos and people stating they didn't know that two very important votes were actually being taken. So I think it's a bad day, but the issue being debated was a very, very serious one. And it was important that there was a proper debate on it, but this isn't the way that it should have ended. And I'm very sad and sorry to see what's happened.
Do you think the position of the Speaker has been undermined?
Well, it's ended up in chaos, but I think that the Speaker was genuinely trying to give a wide variety of people the chance to put forward their views. I mean, Gaza is a very difficult subject. Everyone is very upset about what's happening. The issue is how you try to resolve it. And people have different views. And I think he was trying to let members reflect the views. After all, that is the role of the Speaker, to let members speak up against the executive. And when the previous Speaker, John Bercow, was in that seat, he too had to face a lot of opposition when he was trying to get a variety of views expressed against the wish of the then government. And so I think it's a difficult role, and I think he was trying, but it's sad that it's ended in this way.
And how do you think this looks, I guess, to the general public, who will be looking at those scenes of devastation that we've seen in Israel and Gaza? They'll be looking at what's happened in the House of Commons, and they might be, I guess, holding their head in their hands.
Well, people listening to this wanted to hear a debate about Gaza and to look at the votes and see what happened. Instead, it's ended up, and yes, there was a debate, but it ended up with shouting, chaos, recriminations. And I think they'll be very disappointed. This isn't the way it should have ended.
Thank you very much indeed. Louise Almond there, former Labour MP, talking to us about those extraordinary scenes that we've seen in the House of Commons. And really, I don't remember seeing anything quite like it. We end tonight with the position of the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, really in turmoil. The SNP, the leader of the SNP in Westminster, saying that he sees the Speaker's position as entirely intolerable. We have seen John McDonnell, the former Shadow Chancellor, calling on Keir Starmer to say exactly what pressure was put on him. And then, of course, we've seen John Healey from the Labour front bench saying that actually the Speaker was trying to do the right thing and it's others who are playing politics. It is pretty clear that whatever your view on the Speaker's future, it has been a circus in the House of Commons tonight. Up next, it's the UK Tonight.